best in pop culture, presented by Square Sodas. With me, Jensen Cummings. That is MC32. Chris, what's going on?
What up? How you doing?
Feeling good?
Feeling great.
All right, let's get into this. First, we want to touch on what's this going to be? RIP005, most memorable movie desserts, the Bear Honeydew episode, as well as a quick touch on why we've been off the air for the last couple weeks. We're supporting SAG-AFTRA and the WGA out there rallying for what we know well in the restaurant industry, being underpaid, undervalued, overworked. And so we definitely stand with them. So we took the last couple weeks off in solidarity there. It means a lot to us to have those voices out there, because without those writers, without those actors, shit, the stories of our lives wouldn't have the depth. We wouldn't be able to sit around the table and just quote movie lines nonstop. So we really appreciate them. And Chris, you as a writer, man, what does it mean to have that creative voice out there and somebody fighting for that?
I mean, the writers are what make everything go. It's like the writers are almost like the way that dishwashers are the heart of a restaurant.
Hey,
I feel like that's how writers are for the industry. Like they kind of get overshadowed. It's, you don't see their names up in front in the lights and everything like that. But when it comes down to it, you're not going to have any sort of entertainment without the writers. I mean, other than like the, reality TV and all that stuff, which
we can't live off that shit. Come on.
Right, exactly.
Come on.
Yeah.
If our lives were narrated by the Kardashians, it'd be a sad, sad world.
Facts.
All right. So, we got a Honeydew episode coming up. We'll get into that, everybody. And we also got top 3 all time, as I mentioned, most memorable desserts. Spoiler ahead of spoilers, because this was Marcus's episode, really. And so we wanted to touch on the pastry side, the dessert side, get those most memorable out there for sure. But first, as always, we got to get our minds right. So let's get a little in the kitchen with MC32.
I'm in the kitchen about to give y'all the best of me. Food for your soul, and I got the proper recipe. Don't ask me where I've been, cause I'm on a different mission. Play your own position while I'm talking with precision, cause y'all, I'm in the kitchen about to give y'all the best of me. Food for your soul, and I got the proper recipe. Don't ask me where I've been, cause I'm on a different mission. So play your own position while I'm talking with precision. I be chefing in the kitchen now.
Come on.
Yeah.
That gets me fired up. Even before we start recording, when I'm looking through the banners that they got set up and everything, I like listen to that for just a second. I feel like it gets me settled. It gets me vibe ready, kind of like Gone in 60 Seconds when I listen to Lowrider. And it's like, let's go.
Yeah.
Now we are ready. All right, let's talk a little top 3 of all time, presented by Tenderbelly. I am so excited about this. Shamelessly rocking the squared sodas, Tenderbelly. We can't make this happen without those sponsors that believe in getting these messages out there, getting this content out there. So, and shout out to Shannon Duffy, who we're going to hear from in just a second, who way back, Chris, like 2011 at row 14, when him and his brother Eric were still like delivering pork themselves. Yeah. And we've collaborated on like dozens of projects since. They've always been big supporters. And the number one thing that I learned from Shannon Duffy is do cool shit only and always. And I have always remembered that. He just has a way.
Tenderbelly is always doing cool shit. That's for sure.
They're doing cool shit, and they did something. You mentioned the dishwasher that I always thought was brilliant. They got hats and shirts on every cook, every dishwasher, every bar back, like everybody in the industry. They spent a lot of money to gear us out. And how often do you walk around and see somebody rocking Tenderbelly? Like, yeah. Tenderbelly, and now they're they're in Whole Foods across the country. So big shout out to them. And Shannon's going to be on here, give us a little clip, lead us into top 3 every week. So I'm excited about that. And I think he's going to come on a show live with us and do a little top 3 with us live. So let's get into it. Let's hear what Shannon's got going this week. He's going to walk us into the top 3 of all time.
Hey everybody, this is Shannon Duffy, co-founder of Tenderbelly. This week we're presenting the top 3 of all time. We're starting off with the most memorable movie desserts, and I'm going with Pulp Fiction, Uma Thurman, the $5 milkshake. Let me know.
I swear I did not set him up for that. You all know that's already one of my top movie scenes of all time. Quentin Tarantino, John Travolta, Steve Buscemi, Uma Thurman. Spoiler, that gets an honorable mention for me, but Shannon did the work for me, so that gets a little bit of airtime as well. Top 3 most memorable, Chris, not best desserts, most memorable.
Right.
What are iconic? What, when you think of desserts, when you think of sweets in movies, what do you jump to? $5 milkshake, obviously legendary. Number 3 for you.
All right, number 3 for me is going to be the cream pies and Hook. And that's just from hitting me straight in the nostalgia. Like when I think about the first dessert that I see on screen that makes me go, I want to taste that. I want to see what that tastes like. I think about being a kid, and when Hook comes out and he's at the table, Peter's at the table, Robin Williams, with Rufio and all the Lost Boys, and they're like describing their meal, and they're talking about how delicious it is, and he's not seeing it, and they're like talking about, and then all of a sudden they finally get to him, and they finally get like tap into his imagination, and you see all the food start appearing on the table, and you see these like colorful, and I'm sure it was like whipped cream or something that was just had dye in it or whatever, but like as a kid, yeah, and you know how it is, like they specifically market colorful things for kids like desserts. So me as a kid, I remember seeing that colorful, creamy like pies, and I was just like, that looks delicious. Hook me up. And so I remember like, so every time I think back to the first dessert on film that I could think of that just looked mad delicious, I think about those pies from Hook.
This is what Bob Iger and some of these CEOs need to be thinking about. Use your imagination again. Be childlike again. Remember that these stories that came from somebody's imagination are timeless. They timestamp our lives, right?
Yeah,
and so that is absolutely one that I remember. The other thing I love about that is you eat dessert and dinner at the same time. They got big like roast meats,
right,
and then they got those pies and the food fight. I'm into all of it. I co-sign that number 3 for sure. All right, I did say most memorable, not best desserts, because apple pie, people. American pie, what Jason Biggs says, that poor apple pie is not right. Apple pie is my number 1 dessert of all time. Respect to anybody who can make a banger apple pie. But what he does to that pie is a whole different kind of banger. And man, oh man, that is just iconic. And when Eugene Levy walks in, mortified, absolutely mortified. That jumped out at me right away, which made me concerned about my own mental health. That's the first dessert that I thought of. I give it number 3, but it was literally the first thing that popped into my mind before $5. I'm
wondering, like, when that movie came out, did apple pie sales go up or down?
100. So somebody get some fact check on that. Let's find out. Did apple pie sales go up? And what was that? 2000, 99, 2000?
Probably
2001?
like somewhere around there. Yeah, somewhere
around there. Okay. Area. Apple pie sales across America in the early 2000s. Somebody let us know what that is. All right, number 2 for you.
All right, so we're keeping in tune with the pie theme. And this again is not a delicious one, but the chocolate pie scene and The Help. There's a scene where Octavia Spencer, who's playing Minnie, she feeds her ex-boss a pie that she made, a chocolate pie that she baked her own shit into, and like she doesn't let her. Yeah, she doesn't warn her. She sits there and like lets her start getting down on it, and she's just like, "Oh, this is so delicious. I never understand." And she's like, "Oh, you know what? Eat my shit." And like she's like literally, and she's like,
"Oh, something wrong with you too." That's where your head was.
And I was like, "Yo, that is crazy." Because like sometimes people may threaten with something like that, or they may like give it away so the person doesn't actually eat it. But the fact that she like stood there and watched her get down on it and like had a smile, like that is revenge to the of the highest order. And so like that definitely hits my list for sure.
Man, pie's getting a bad. Somebody please tell us some scenes in movies where pie is the hero, not the zero, because so far our memories of pie not so good. So good. Okay. Number 2 for me, Strudel with Crème from Inglourious Basterds. All right. Clearly, you can tell I'm biased towards Quentin Tarantino movies, but that is just legendary. Christoph Waltz won an Academy Award for that, and rightfully so. One of the most sinister characters I've ever seen on screen, but fucking quiet about it. Like quiet, he wasn't bombastic, big. He was diabolical, Chris. Like, damn. And the fact that there's so much time spent waiting for that damn cream really sunk in with me, because Tarantino is known for having a ridiculous amount of dialogue. How many words does Samuel L. Jackson say in his movies? And so the fact that there was a lot of quiet time, there was a lot of close-ups of that strudel, which looked really good, by the way, and that cream meant that there was something really deep and going on beyond just what's happening of, hey, I want to have you eat this pie, this strudel, excuse me. And so the fact that Melanie Laurent, is just so uncomfortable that whole scene, because she has to be thinking he knows I'm found out, I'm dead like the rest of my family. And I looked this up, Chris. There's actually kind of this little undertone there where apparently that whipped cream would not have been kosher. And so it was a test to see
Okay.
if she was Jewish, because if she was, that's problematic. So again, the depth of the depravity in a scene like that, powerful. And the dessert looked pretty good too, which made it all the worse when you're sitting there going, this is the worst experience this woman could ever imagine. And I'm sitting there going, that strudel looks really good. Like, the hell is wrong with me? So that's what Quentin Tarantino is good at. All right. That's my number 2. For you, what's number 1?
So I mean, you took it. Like, that strudel scene is my number 1.
Strudel's number 1?
So
okay.
I mean, call it cheating because I let you do all the talking. But I just what more can you say? That scene was phenomenal for me. And like, I remember sitting in the theater and like thinking about how stressful that must have been, and the tension, the way that Quentin Tarantino built up, and Christoph Waltz like built the tension between between two people in a scene like that. And like, it was palpable. But by the same token, you're looking at that strudel and you're like, oh, that, I wonder what that actually looks like. It tastes good, like, so you're stressed and it's like anxiety inducing, but you're also like, I bet that shit is good though.
That looks hella good too. Yeah, there's something wrong with us, that's for sure. All right, we've had this is some seriously sinister stuff so far. We started really lighthearted. I mean, food fight and Hook with the colorful stuff, amazing. Then we got a little dark there for a while. I'm gonna bring it back to some lightness and go kid memory. Ice cream sundae in Home Alone, when Kevin McAllister is there in the recliner watching the movies, and he's just got the ridiculous smorgasbord of dessert stuff and perfectly scooped ice cream. No kid is perfectly scooping ice cream like that, but I just remember being a kid going, well, if I did make my parents disappear, that's exactly what I would be doing. So that was number 1 for me, Home Alone. It's a good list. That's a solid list. Again, most memorable. We will absolutely show some more love to our pastry people out there and get some of the best desserts, and desserts that just are iconic, not just because they're ridiculous or over the top or sinister, but because there's some technique behind them. So we got you. We will make sure we'll get those in for you. What are some of yours? How's our list? And what are some of your most memorable movie desserts of all time? All right, that was a solid list. All right, let's get into this episode. We're going to be talking Honeydew, episode 5. So let me just cue this up real quick, and we got a little bit of a clip here from this episode. Let's see what we got.
How'd you get good at this? Honestly, I've made a lot of mistakes.
That's the secret. Just fuck up.
It might be, fuck up. I think as I started early, I got my skill set up really quick, and then started to feel like I was really the best, like at all these really good places, I really was the best cook. And then I started at this really great place as a commie, and this other chef started the same day as me. And I thought we were competition, but really we weren't. He was better than me, much better than me. He worked harder and faster than I ever could, and it was the first time I realized that I wasn't the best, and I was never going to be the best.
So real quick, I just got to make an adjustment. You said that was episode 5. We're on episode 4, homie.
Episode 4. I'm not good at the counting. Episode 4, Honeydew. Yes. Okay. We still got a lot of episodes. This is 10 episodes in this season.
Yeah,
I mean, this is good.
yeah.
You know, the hardest part about doing this is
Not
for you and I are
binging.
now both committed to watching an episode at a time.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
Yeah. And I got friends of mine who aren't even restaurant people. And they're like, oh man, The Bear is amazing. I just binged the whole second episode. And I'm like, don't tell me nothing. They're like, you haven't watched it? I'm like, and I have to explain to them the whole scenario. And they're like, oh man. Okay, I won't say anything, but
I don't know why we decided some self-sacrificing torture over here was a part of a good recipe to make sure that
we did this for y'all. We did this for y'all.
We
This
wanted
is
to
all
make
for y'all.
sure that we did not cloud our judgment of each episode based on the accumulation of episodes, because you know, like you go, oh, okay, now they're clapping back to that. Now it makes sense why they did or didn't do that. Okay, now I have the context. But I think it's important if you're watching a show to be able to say, hey, this episode can stand alone. So as always, we're going to give you our ratings out of 10 in 3, 2, 1, 6.4.
7.7.
Wow, we're way apart. Is that
Way off.
1.5? Damn. All right. I usually let you go first. I'm gonna go first because I need you to defend your position here.
Take it. I'm ready.
Whew. Okay. All right. So this episode, again, named Honeydew, directed by Rami Youssef and written by Stacey Osai Kuffour. I'd say maybe shout out to them that it was a beautiful episode. We saw that scene. It was really like they did a good job of maybe capturing the essence of Marcus going to Copenhagen. Fine. And that might be where my affection for this episode ended, because I just don't know why they're doing our guy Marcus so dirty, man. Like Sidney had such a great episode going around Chicago, and then all of a sudden Marcus is in this like bromance with Luca, you know, our guy Will Poulter, who, shout out to Will, like he like begged to be a part of this show. He really likes the Bear. I've seen him on some interviews, really likes and appreciates restaurants and chefs, and definitely check out what he's talked about, how underrated Black chefs are and how few Michelin stars there are assigned to Black chefs. So like he's really into the culture and trying to understand it. So I appreciate that. I know he also worked a lot on his skills. Fine. But Will Poulter, also somebody that I've been loving since way back. I mean, like Detroit, he was absolute nails in that. We're the Millers with Jason Sudeikis and Jennifer Aniston, all the way back to Chronicles of Narnia, the Dawn Treader, when he was a little obnoxious kid in that one, which was with Ben Barnes. Ben Barnes was in The Punisher with John Bernthal, who's in The Bear. There's your 6 degrees of separation for this little episode here. I just was not realistic to me that that's going to happen, that this tight budget that they have, somehow they're going to find a way to get Marcus to Copenhagen, that they are going to get him this stage where it's all roses and rainbows and the instant bromance that they have. And the fact that Will Poulter is calling him chef already. Fine, if that's Carmi's thing, but I don't know that that's everybody else's thing too. So that was a big piece that kind of missed for me. Those are my big takeaways. I'll let you get in here to kind of defend a couple of those points there, because I thought those were big misses in this episode.
All right. So I think part of why I loved it is because I've been in a similar situation. Like, I know that you may think that it's unrealistic for somebody to like Marcus to go overseas and stage and become buddy and have like this relationship or form a bond with the chef that he's staging under or staging with or what have you. But I've actually lived through that.
Dude.
So a few years ago,
come on, you.
Yeah. So I went on a stage in Brest, France, and I worked under a chef named Jan Plessard, and he brought me to his house. And because he was like in addition to working in his restaurant, he was like, you know, aside from all of this stuff, I want to teach you how to make macarons, and I want to be able to do it correctly. So he gave me his address, and then we went to his house. Like, he took me into his house, and we start bonding and having these conversations, and he's teaching me how to make macarons in his personal kitchen. We're shooting the shit, we're bonding, we're talking, we're learning about each other. He also shows me how to make like a quick microwave cup, like a cake in a cup. And this is before they all became like a huge thing now on all the
hot
shelves.
Molecular gastronomy.
Yeah. And so like we're standing there, and I was there for most of the day, and like we're chilling, after that we have dinner. And so it's like I really resonated with this episode because I had a similar experience. So it's not, to me, it's not out of the realm of possibility because I literally went through that. Like I appreciated that, and I felt that. So I mean,
so that for you personally makes a lot of sense for me. And shout out to
Yeah.
Plassard, because that's rare, and maybe even more rare for French chefs. The notoriety that they have, and maybe that's myth to some degree as well. What the Bear has done a good job is showing a lot of the hard realities. So maybe they do need to show some of the softer realities too. I can appreciate that potentially. Do you feel though that your experience is the norm that you know of and hear of and have seen from our compatriots across the industry? Or is a stage typically at a high level place like that? Noma's been called out for it specifically for somebody, not getting paid for months and months of work, spending 12 to 15 hours a day making fruit leather beetles. They're not learning much at all except that one technique. And now Noma has to close because they can't afford $50,000 in additional payroll a month. Like, these are the realities that I see more, but maybe that's glass half full. What's your macro
I feel
take
like
on
there's a ratio, because granted, for the amount of people that stage through these restaurants, I'm sure that the majority of them have a very impersonal experience with dealing with the chef. They take what they can learn from what the scraps that they're given and what they're allowed to do there. But for every group of those, think about how many great chefs that when you hear about their origin story, they talk about how they staged somewhere and a chef took them under their wing and taught them certain things that sparked the fire that brought them to start doing what they currently do, whatever cuisine they make that has made them end up being famous. A lot of them have origin stories like that, where it's like you see black and white pictures of them in France staging with somebody and talking about how they were brought under their wing, and something about their specific relationship with that chef may not be something that chef had with any other person in the kitchen at that time, aside from maybe their sous chefs, but something with them. And so I feel like there's one in every few people that do have an experience like that, enough for it to be the norm, or considered not so much far out as you may think it is.
have a narrative worth exploring?
Yeah.
I think it's fine. Right away when you were talking about that, I think of these old videos I saw of Marco Pierre White. He one of the best chefs ever, I think. And Gordon Ramsay as his like junior sous chef, like out there like rolling pasta. He didn't have all the wrinkly forehead and crazy looking face from being a hardened chef. He was a young buck at the time. And I do also think, though, a lot of times when you hear those origin stories, there's a little bit of this, like, they were mistreated, but now they somehow appreciate it because they attribute that to getting them to this point. That's also something that maybe I over-examine a little bit, but sometimes there is this thing that I survived abuse and trauma, so now it's my response, and I'm better for it. The reality is you got through it and you're better despite of it quite often, but we sometimes conflate getting through it and rising above to that being the circumstance that challenged us to get to that point. And I think that's sometimes a fallacy, something that we like rationalize. So I want to be careful of that as well, that we aren't glorifying that trauma because getting a plate thrown at your head is a badge of honor. Turns out it's toxic and stupid. And there's other ways to challenge and overcome. So there's humanity in all of it, which means that it is a sticky shit pie, basically, is what that means, because it's challenging and it's human. So okay, one last little thing, because we got the MC here that I need to get your perspective. I've been loving the soundtrack. We've mentioned it quite a few times. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If you are producing this episode, are you going with the Ron Burgundy jazz flute and saxophone in this episode? Because it felt awkward and uncomfortable to me as Marcus is leisurely strolling through Copenhagen and then randomly finding a crashed dude on a bike. That made no sense to me. Whatever. But then there's, this like jazz flute thing. Did they drop the ball on that musically?
No, I feel like the music fit the scene and the scenery, and it was done that way on purpose, because just like Marcus being complete, like way out of his element by going all the way from Chicago to Copenhagen, right? Like the music reflects that. So the music that we normally see when we're being in Chicago, we're in the restaurant, we're in the people's lives locally around that area. Now, to show how far out of the scenery we are and out of our normal arena, I feel like the music being so different from the regular soundtrack fit the fact that Marcus is so far out of his own element in Chicago and all that stuff by being in Copenhagen. So to me, it makes perfect sense.
Damn. All right. Can I say I totally disagree and you're probably 100% right? Can I say both of those things at the same
absolutely.
time?
As long as we highlight the second part.
The latter is more important. All right, fine. Like, creating a sense and place. Music is amazing at creating a sense of time and place. I just don't like that time and place. I guess we're back to the you're the lover, I'm the fighter, because last episode, everybody, I was at 8.7 and you were at 7.5 or something. So we flip-flop back to our natural state, I feel like.
There was one thing also that like really resonated with me, just one line or two lines really, but Marcus was asking him like, was it worth it, the time that you put in? And he was like, ask me tomorrow. And I feel like that is so indicative of just how the industry is for a lot of us, where there's some days when everything is clicking and you're like, man, I love that I do this. I can't think of doing anything else. Like, this is worth it. All the blood, sweat, and tears, it's all worth it. But then there's some days where it's like, man, it's been a 15-hour day. You're exhausted. Maybe you just had a shit show of a day and everything went wrong. And you're sitting at home just like, man, I don't even know why I do this. Like, why? Maybe I should start looking for another job. And then the next day you're back at it and it's worth it again. And so a lot of times, like it switches on and off based on how things flow. And so I feel like that was a really honest statement right there and very indicative of
Groundhog's Day, right? Every day you almost start at zero again.
Yep.
And you can make or break that day based on what it is. That's maybe some of the strength and challenge of it. You kind of get to reset each day, which is interesting. And I think Luca is only in this one episode. I think Will Poulter is only in this one episode. Just, I think I heard that in an interview or something. He talked about, I wanted it just, being in the one episode. I was like, oh, he's only in the one episode, the way he said that. Again, I'm not sure 100% because we haven't seen it all the way through, even though obviously we're aware of what's happening and you can't scroll past every single clip. But I'm pretty sure he's only in this one episode. What I'm interested in, though, is there was a lot of foreshadowing, it felt like, in this episode. The way that they talked about, Marcus talked about himself. There's what's happening with his mother. So I'm interested kind of how that dynamic plays out a little bit more and what that storyline is and the transition, from making burgers to then, going and doing the original beef, Mr. Beef. And I wonder about who that other chef is, who is better than him. And I had this gut moment where I think it's Carmy.
That would be crazy.
Carmy.
Huh.
Yeah. And so that's there just felt like this foreshadowing thing. They were not saying enough for the amount of time they were spending with the dialogue between the two of them. So I got this sense that there was something else happening there. And when I watched it the second time to take my notes, I was like, why are they like talking about this guy and he's better than me? And so I worked as hard as I could to keep up with him. Like, why did they give that guy so much airtime?
I'm going to say this. If that ends up being the case, then that further solidifies my rating over your rating. I'm just saying.
Damn it. I just opened the door for that.
I'm just
Well, look, I mentioned it too. They might be long tailing this a little too much, right? I
Mhm.
think the fact that we haven't really gotten to see Tina at all pisses me off because, again, she's my favorite character for sure. And you kind of forgetting about everybody's stories. They're stretching the storylines a little bit long. The very first scene that we saw was Marcus with his mother, and it took to episode 4 to have any furthering of that story arc for that character. So they need to get back to why that's Carmi sooner than later, because I think one of the struggles they might end up with is that they're stretching some of these story arcs a little bit too far, because I appreciate the fact that they are opening up the lives of the other characters, which I think is important. Sidney now I appreciate and like a lot more as a character in season 2 than I ever did in season 1. I think they've been good about that. Even her one scene in this of hiring people, it has to deal with a sexist dude who goes, when do I get to talk to the chef? And she goes, you are. Right. So even these things that she's experiencing, there's a little more depth to it versus it just being about Carmi. But also we need to make sure that there's cohesion, because it's starting to feel like a bunch of individual Marvel movies where everyone has their own scenes. And how are we tying those scenes together is going to be important. So we'll see. I'm sure they'll do a great job of it because they have great writers who have
Mhm.
crushed it in 2 seasons so far. So, all right, everyone. That's it. Let us know your ranking. Let us know how good or bad our rankings are. One of us was way off, so let us know which of us was way off in our ranking.
I got my
And
camera angles wrong. Yep, it's that one.
yeah, this guy,
Yeah.
this guy right here. Come on, where did he go? He was in the high 7s? Come on. All right, let us know how we did. We'll try better next episode. We'll be back with episode 5 of The Bear next week.